Hi guys, welcome to Chindu's TechNet. This is the first video of Alwayson series. So Alwayson is a high availability and disaster recovery solution, which was introduced in 2012 SQL Server. So before we jump into Alwayson, so I just wanted to, describe a few basic areas or concepts, the reason behind, so we have high availability and disaster recovery, right? So that is a SLA, right? So what is an SLA? SLA is an agreement between a end user and the organization, right? So you will have a agreement between end user and the team or organization just to make sure, right? So so I'm talking about, so with respect to database or SQL Server. So when we have a agreement between end user and organization, so we will make sure from database side, we will make sure that the service or databases are available all the time, right? So available all the time, and the data is available without any loss, right? So we are make sure that your data is available all the time. I mean, your databases are available, your services are available all the time, even if there is a disaster happens, or you will have a minimum to no data loss in the event of disaster happens, right? So you should, as a DBA or as a database team, you should be make sure the databases are online all the time so that they will not have any data loss, they will not have any downtime, so that they will not have any revenue loss, right? Now, so what are the main objects to meet the SLA? Right? So there are two main objectives that we have. So one is recovery point objective. So based on these two objectives, so we define an SLA of your databases, right? So what are the so based on these two objects, one is recovery point objective and recovery time objective, right? So with the help of these two, we will define, or we can understand, so what is the SLA that I am, I am giving to the end user, or what is the, or whether, so I will be breaching SLA or not, right? With the help of these two objects. Breaching is nothing but, for example, let's say your SLA is 1 hour. And if you cannot recover within 1 hour, so it's considered as a breaching SLA, right? So let's say you have a SQL Server, right? Let's consider you have a SQL Server, whatever SQL Server it is, either 2016, 12, whatever it is. So let's consider 16. So it's a standalone SQL Server. I'm not talking about high availability and any concepts. Let's consider it is a SQL Server 2016 standalone SQL Server, right? So you have a critical, some like banking application or some application that you have. Let's consider any IRCTC. Let's consider IRCTC database, which is connected to the application. Right. So IRCTC application, and some reason, right? So you're taking backups, like, so it's a normal maintenance that you are taking a weekly full backup, daily differential, every 30 minutes or 15 minutes, whatever it is. It's a log backup. So this is your backup strategy. I don't care whatever backup strategy it is. Let's consider this is the backup strategy that I have. So this database one day, or whatever, like, so one day, so my SQL service is down for some reason, or my database is crashed, right? So if database is crashed or database is not accessible, right? So what is the solution that you provide, right? If the database is not accessible or if the SQL service is down, so we don't know what was the reason for SQL service to go offline, right? So it might take 1 hour or 1 day or even more than that. So we don't know. So we were trying, but we were unable to bring the service online. Then what happens to this application? So if your IRCTC website is down, then what happens to your bookings, right? So everything will be down, right? So you will have huge huge revenue loss from the application point of view, right? From SQL side, so you have you almost so of course you bridge the SLA, right? So SLA is an agreement, as I said, right? So with the end user and the company organization. So they have some so certain hours that you'll have to make sure that you'll have to respond or you'll have to resolve the issue, but you are unable to resolve within a SLA. So there is a huge revenue loss. So in that case, so what you can do, so what solution that you have. So your application is down. So what your SQL service is down. So you don't know when the SQL service will be online. So what you can do, you maybe install a new SQL instance, or you just take the backup of these databases and restore in a different instance, right? So take the backup of the databases, right? So whatever backups we have, copy these backups to a different location or to different server and restore these databases, right? So restore the databases and bring the database online, right? You will bring it online. That's okay. So you bring it online. So once the databases are available here, so temporarily you will change the connection of your application pointing to the server, right? So just a temporary solution to make sure your application is online, as so your application is online, so that you restore in a different server and change the application connection string pointing to this server, right? So it's a huge so process. You bring the application online, right? So this time, the overall time can be 1 hour or can be 1 day, or it may be more than that, right? So the amount of database that we have, the amount of time it takes to restore, the amount of time it takes to change the connection, everything, right? It is kind of complete circle that you'll have to calculate, right? Now, so you brought the database online, fine, but we are not guarantee that you will not have a data loss, because let's consider this 30 minutes, every 30 minutes you are taking log backup, right? So you are so at around 10:50 a.m. the database is crashed, stopped, SQL service is stopped. You have a backup of the database, log backup of the database at 10:30 a.m., right? So you have a log backup at 10:30 and the SQL service is stopped at 10:50. Then what is the duration of data loss that you have? Is 20 minutes. So 20 minutes data loss. So in a OLTP, online transactional processing systems, so 30 minutes is not small, data loss, especially when it is a kind of, so banking, IRCTC or any other, business, any other heavy critical servers, right? So you have a 20 minutes data loss. This is what we call it as a RPO, recovery point objective. So this is what we call it as a recovery point objective. So recovery point objective is nothing but how much data loss we effort. right? So if you say, if you take this, how much data loss, right? So if you take this RPO, so RPO is nothing but, so how much data loss you can afford, right? So what point you can recover the data. So here in this case, till 10:30 I can recover. So till 10:30 a.m. I can recover my data. From 10:30 to 10:50, so almost 20 minutes, I lost the data, right? So that is what we call it as a RPO, recovery point objective. Now come to the other point, other main, so objective is time, right? How much time it takes to bring the application online. So this is overall time to bring the application online. Not only database, right? Your application should be online, right? So your application should be functional, right? So how much time it takes to so start your business, right? So you will have to take the backups, copy, restore the databases here, right? So once the database is restored, you will have to change the connection string of your application and bring the application online, right? So this amount of time it takes to bring your application is called recovery time objective. So recovery time objective is what is the so how long it takes to bring the application online. So this is what it is, right? How quickly, so you recover your application, right? So what is the total cost of your downtime, right? So what is the total downtime of your application? That is what we call it as a recovery time objective. So recovery point objective is how much data loss we effort, right? So here the data loss is 20 minutes because we would be able to recover until 10:30 because we have backups until 10:30 and we were able to recover. So 20 minutes data loss, that is recovery point, right? So this point 10 till 10:30 a.m. I'm able to recover, right? So this is what we call it as a recovery point objective. Recovery time objective is the overall duration to bring the application online, right? So this is the total downtime of your application. Now, so with the backup and restore, so we have huge amount of so data loss, like whatever data loss and downtime, right? So to solve this problem, we have certain features were introduced in the SQL Server, right? So those features are right. So backup restore, we have so already discussed, and if you consider, so if you consider backup restore, so we have the recovery data loss. Data loss can be so the amount of time we so how frequently you're taking backups, it depends on how frequently you're taking backups, and based on that you recover the data, right? So the RPO is can be hours and time, right? So it can be hours to days, right? So like how long it takes to bring the application online, right? What is your total downtime? Now let's consider, so I consider always on is the top in the list, right? So because there are a few advantages in always on over other high availability and disaster recovery solutions we had in previous versions of SQL Server or even current versions of SQL Server. All right, so we have something called synchronous and asynchronous. So we have detailed discussion on what are these two, synchronous and asynchronous, and I will cover more details. So here just understand in older versions, like, so we have database mirroring, right? So even current versions, we have database mirroring. So in database mirroring, we use it to call as a high safety and high performance, right? This is same as high safety is synchronous, high performance as asynchronous, right? So what is the RPO and RTO is highlighted here, right? So let's consider that you have always on with synchronous, right? So if you have always on with synchronous configured, so you have an automatic failover supported. So what does it mean? If one service is down, or if one server is down, and immediately the databases will move to another server. So you will not have any data loss, right? So in synchronous, you will not have any data loss because the data is always in sync. If you insert one, so it will be inserted one there. So you will not have any data loss if it is a always on synchronous replica. And what about recovery time? Of course, so recovery time. So none of these solutions will have a zero recovery time, because if failover happens, right? So let's say the same scenario, let's consider you have two servers, right? So for always on or any high availability, we will have multiple servers will be maintained, right? If this service is down, so the services will go, I mean, the databases or availability group. So that we are going to talk when we discuss about always on feature, right? So the databases will move from here to here, right? So at some time, right? So this application is connecting to this. And if this is not available, this server is not available, whatever connections which are coming in from the application will be disconnected, right? So the connections will be disconnected. Once the failover happens, once, so the resources are moved. Once the group, I'll just use a resource as a terminology. If the resource is moved from here to here, then application will resume and connect to this server without manual intervention, without much waiting time, right? So it will be connected to this server, the application will be connected. So just in a few seconds, the amount of time it takes to move resource from here to here is your downtime of your application, right? So that is the reason you will have just few seconds of downtime, but you will not have any data loss because the data will be in sync. So asynchronous, I mentioned seconds. Yeah. So it depends on how much data is lagging behind, right? How much data is pending on the server, on the primary replica, not at reach to the secondary server, right? So you will have some data loss. It depends on how much data is pending, and you will have some so recovery time, like potential, like if it is an asynchronous replica, we have a detailed discussion, so don't worry about it. But just for you to understand, if it is asynchronous replica, if this availability group is down, or this server is down, you don't have a automatic failover. That is what it is. You don't have automatic failover. So if you don't have automatic failover, there is a manual intervention due to failover the resource to another server. That is the reason you will have a little longer, so RTO recovery to, time to recover your data, time to recover your databases, right? It will take little longer. And SQL failover cluster, right? So SQL failover cluster, so SQL failover cluster, we don't consider SQL failover cluster as a disaster recovery solution, right? So it is always a high availability, because if one server or one machine is down, the service will move. I mean, the resource will move from one server to another server. So it's considered as a high availability solution. And what is the potential time to recover? it is same as like, so seconds to minutes. The same concept applies here. If service is down, the entire service is down, and the resource will move from here to here, right? So this resource movement can be either automatic or manual. You might think how, so if this service is down, so how you will fail over the cluster, resource manually, right? So we will, I'll upload, so I'll record a session on that, so that you will have a better understanding how to move the resource manually if the server or service is down, the Windows failover cluster, the sequence failover cluster, right? So that is the reason I mentioned here seconds to minute. If it is automatic failover, it will be seconds. If it is a manual failover, it will be a minutes. Yes, automatic failover is supported. And database mirroring. So we have a database mirroring with high safety, right? So it's a kind of, so always on was, so always on was introduced or extended properties of database mirroring. So I would say in that way, like, so always on is an extended property of database mirroring, right? So we have a synchronous commit with witness, right? Suppose if you have a high safety with a witness server, then automatic failover will be supported, right? So we have zero data loss because the data will be in sync, like always on. And you have second, so you can have seconds to minutes, right? So the potential recovery to bring the database online, right? So seconds if it is automatic failover. If it takes longer, then it will be a minute, right? So that is what it is. High safety, so these are two things, right? High safety, you can configure with witness or without witness, right? So with witness, you have an automatic failover. If it is not without, if you don't have a witness server, then it will be a manual failover, right? Done. So even always on the same way. So if you can configure synchronous, manual, and automatic, so you can consider this as a seconds to minutes, the failover. Sorry. Now, so high performance, it is kind of asynchronous, right? So asynchronous database mirroring and the recovery time, right? So the recovery time will be minutes, and the data loss, like, so potential data loss is same as always on asynchronous. Whatever data which is not at delivered or which are not at received by the secondary is the amount of data loss that we have. It can be seconds or it can be whatever data loss we have. And log shipping we consider as a disaster recovery solution because we don't have automatic failover support, right? So we don't have automatic failover supported in log shipping. Log shipping is main purpose is to use a disaster recovery solution, right? So the data loss can be minutes because the amount of so in log shipping, normally we have three jobs, right? Backup, copy, restore, right? So if it takes yeah, the recovery or data loss, it depends on whatever backups available and whether the copy is done and restore. It depends on how when the restore last restore was happened. And of course, like recovery time, so it will be more than that. So if you have so data not available, then you'll have to have failover, right? So if the log shipping, so if you want to failover, so you will have to switch over and you'll have to change the application connection string and you have to do some manual work in log shipping, right? So that is the reason it takes more time in compared to any of the high availability and disaster recovery features that we have. And backup, copy, restore that we already discussed. We don't have any, we don't consider any high availability or disaster recovery if we use just backup, copy, restore, right? So you're taking backup and restoring on the secondary server, right? So these are the so some solutions that we have to meet the SLA, right? So SLA, so it can be just seconds, or it can be, so it can be days. It depends on your solution. So that is the reason, whenever we define or whenever we design a high availability and disaster recovery solution, just to make sure, mm, just to make sure to understand the business criticality and design a solution accordingly. Okay, that's it. So I will be I'll post more videos on always on coming days. So please feel let me know if any questions or concerns. Thank you. Have a nice day. Bye bye.